Welcome to the GSN Spotlight Series. My name is Jeff Ackel, and today I'm going to interview Hareth Tabbalat. Hareth is from Amman, Jordan, and he is a member of MELA class of 2018. And welcome, Hareth, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
So let's dive right in. Tell us about yourself a little bit. Who are you? What do you do? Just in a kind of a brief summary of what you're into right now and where you come from.
Okay. Well, in a nutshell, I own a couple of companies based here in Amman, Jordan, and the first is a retailer, wholesaler, and distributor of safety equipment. And that could be safety, like hiking and camping equipment. It could also be for industrial work environments, safety at heights, search and rescue operations and stuff like that. And then the other company is a destination management company, and we organize inbound tours for tourists that want to visit Jordan, as well as international expeditions for Jordanians that want to go and explore abroad, to places like Tanzania, where we climb Mount Kilimanjaro. We spend a lot of time in the Himalayas. We've got trips to Lebanon, Turkey, Switzerland, Italy, France, and a few other places. And then besides that, we have several social environmental initiatives that kind of work hand in hand and in line with our businesses. One project is called Walking Jordan, and it's in a way what kind of started it all. Walking Jordan was founded in 2003 or 2004, and it's a volunteer-based hiking group. And the idea was just to get people outside. At that time, no one was really interested in hiking and camping in Jordan. It wasn't on anybody's radar. Only a handful of companies were organizing adventure trips, and they were mostly really expensive and for tourists and not locals. So we started that group in an effort to get more people involved with the outdoors and just hiking.
Very cool.
Yeah. We also have another initiative called Cleaning Jordan, where we go out to the same places we hike, the various valleys and forests and hiking trails, and we just clean them up and make sure that they're litter-free for us when we want to come back, and for anybody else that decides to walk on those trails.
That is very cool, and those are effectively nonprofits or strictly volunteer based organizations. The second part of what you do, right?
Correct.
Okay, very cool. So why do you do all of that? What is it about those things that makes you do what you do, or why do your companies do what they do? Give me the why behind all of that.
Well, my partners and I, who also happen to be my cousins, we've been hiking together since we were kids. Essentially what happened was, as soon as we figured out how to walk, my father grabbed us and threw us into the mountains. And he's like, now figure this out. And then when I was 19, in my second year of university, I get a phone call from my dad, and he asks me if I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, to which I responded, absolutely. And then my cousins joined us as well, and we went and we climbed that mountain. And then when we came back, I'm not going to say I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I was pretty clear on what I did not want to do. And at the time, I was pre-med in university, and I decided to change up my majors. And within a couple of years, we were working on like a pseudo business plan of how we could potentially open a retail store selling hiking and camping equipment, as well as an outbound travel agency. So those were kind of like in the beginning, the main goals, and then the business just kept on evolving from that. So to sum it up, it's just we loved being outdoors, and we realized that a lot of people would also benefit from being outdoors, and had they experienced just a tiny bit and a taste of the mountains and the valleys and the forests that Jordan has to offer, they would also fall in love with the outdoors too. And at that same time, we realized that there was a litter problem. We realized that there's a smoking problem, there's a diabetes problem. We have a lot of natural, we have a lot of heritage in Jordan, a lot of man-made wonders that were created by the many different, there was like a Greco-Roman period, the Byzantine period, the Epi-Paleolithic, the Neolithic, the Iron and Bronze ages, the Stone ages. You can find remnants of all of these different time periods in Jordan, and there's a lot of tomb raiding and what's the word, vandalism that happens at some of these sites. So we also realize that these places need protection, which is where the like ideas for cleaning Jordan came from.
Awesome. When you hear the word sustainability, what does that mean to you? How would you define that word?
Not to be overly simplistic, but I want my kids to be able to experience a banana and and actually be able to go on a polar expedition and see polar bears, or go to the various islands around the oceans around this planet that are virtually just sinking back into the ocean now. So sustainability to me means, how can we protect and preserve the things that we have today? And we all know there's a lot of species are endangered every day. Species go extinct all the time, and that's not just species of animals, but also plants. So I think it's very important that we need to kind of protect these things and focus on ways in which we can preserve them for future generations.
Very good. So you're into a lot of things right now. It sounds like you have 3-4 different pursuits. I guess they all kind of merge, but of all of that, what's interesting to you right now? Maybe one specific thing that you've worked on recently, or something you're about to start working on. I mean, what's your focus as of this moment right now?
So I'm developing 3 new projects. The first, and this is directly in line with our company Trex, we're organizing a marathon. We're organizing it's called the Full Moon Desert Marathon. It's going to be in Wadi Rum, which is a desert about 3 hours south of Jordan. And so that's kind of preoccupying a lot of our time at the business. But besides that, I'm also developing 2 other projects. One of them is an ethnobotany. So there's a lot of Bedouin communities scattered around Jordan. And Bedouins are, for the most part, an oral culture. Some of them can read and write, but even the ones that don't. So every time one of these Bedouin men or women passes away, unfortunately, they also take everything that they know with them. All the stories, all the poems, their tips and tricks on how to survive the desert, how to find water, how to find food, identifying medicinal plants and the properties of those plants. So I've begun a small project with a few collaborators where we're kind of, the idea is to begin interviewing Bedouins, extracting and collecting as much information as possible. I've begun to look at grants potentially to see if we could, get a small office set up with a few computers, train some of the Bedouins on how to enter data, and then they could also begin doing interviews themselves and then building on this database. And I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure what will come of this at the end. Maybe a book, maybe a publication, maybe a photo project, a video. It could be lots of different things, but right now we're just focused on like, how do we best approach these communities and how to preserve as much of this knowledge as possible. Because I believe that to solve a lot of the problems that our world is going to face, all these modern problems that are popping up, we're going to have to rely somewhat on traditional knowledge. And I could give you one very simple example of this, which had a big impact on me. When I visited Cuba last 2 years ago in May, and it was 6 months after they were hit by Hurricane Matthew, which was the strongest hurricane that had hit that island on record. And it ruined a lot of the natural habitats, wildlife. I remember speaking to some of the locals, and one of them told me that hummingbirds started flying towards people wearing colorful clothing because there were no more flowers around. So anyway, we met with this man named Urbano in a village called Baracoa. It's on the eastern side of the island, and Urbano is nicknamed the King of Chocolate. He's 86 at the time. He was 86 at the time. And when the storm hit, it wiped out this particular type of fly that was responsible for pollinating the plants in his cocoa plantation. So he had a plantation, but the flowers were not being pollinated and were not becoming fruit. So relying on his experience and history and working in agriculture and farming and such, he recalled that the pumpkin plant also produces a similar flower to the cocoa plant in that it doesn't have a particularly strong scent or a vibrant color, and also relies on a specific fly for pollination. So he grew a small pumpkin patch, and then the flies that pollinated the pumpkin patch started gathering around, and then he just moved the pumpkin patch closer towards his cocoa plantation, and that same fly started pollinating the cocoa plants. And that is just a perfect example of how you could use traditional knowledge to solve a problem that is happening today.
That's pretty amazing. So one more question, and then I want to maybe dive in a little bit into some of the things you told us and learn some more about them. But before we do that, just quickly give us one interesting thing about you. Something you like to do, something you've done in the past, life experience, hobby, an inspiration you have for something or something you want to do in the future. Just something specific about you that you think may be interesting to everybody watching.
Well, when people ask me what I do, I always struggle answering that question. But photographer has kind of been the one I've been leaning more towards recently. So I'm a photographer. I've been taking photographs for about 10 years. I actually haven't done anything longer than that. So that's that's the record holder for time spent on any activity or extracurricular hobby.
That's your attention span record.
Yeah. Right. And that's something I've been kind of delving more deeply into. And I'm also a mountaineer. So I've been to Nepal 6 times, and I try to head to the Himalayas at least once a year, because to me, there's no place like the mountains.
That's great. I want to kind of go back and maybe dive into some of this because this is great stuff. It's a wide variety of things that you have going on, and I love the inspiration that you have behind what you do. It kind of seems like you've got your companies divided into 2 segments. You kind of have a for-profit side of what you're doing, right? And you also have like a not-for-profit side that kind of mingles together with the for-profit side. And I think that's a really interesting thing to me, because it kind of parallels, I think, one of the challenges with a lot of sustainability efforts that are out there, right? You're trying to balance doing good with with the business side of it, and being having something be economical in the sense that it can support the people who are trying to go out there and do good. So just for you and your cousins and your business partners specifically, how do you balance that and spend equal amounts of time on both the things that make you enough money to continue living, and also the things that make you passionate, that get you excited and really give you the why behind what you're doing?
Where do we find the time? um, I might be able to sum it up into 3 words: automation, delegation, and outsourcing. So we kind of looked at the company and saw, we broke down all the processes and looked at the things that we could just automate and make, like, for example, reminders for follow-up emails. Or we announce a trip, it automatically sends an email to our entire database. So just whatever that we can download software or hardware to make automatic, we would do that. And then whatever's left, what we could delegate amongst ourselves, we delegate. And then what we either can't do or don't want to do, we'll outsource. Mm-hmm. And we try to grow the businesses slowly, rather than take on a dozen different projects at the same time and putting a lot of energy into them. We're just slowly growing things and kind of progressing organically. For the most part, we've also begun hiring people full-time, and that's been a huge load off of our shoulders. I mean, I remember like 3-4 months ago, I hired one of our first employee, and on day one, 50% of what I did day to day to the business was just removed from my plate. And I'm about to hire somebody else in the next couple of weeks for social media and marketing and communication in general. So that
is that for which business in particular is that for? Is that for your gear or your equipment business, or is that for your trip? Both. Okay. Okay. So they're working in both companies for you at the same time.
Some people are, yes.
Okay.
So when it comes to communication, it's we try to like the gear and the trips kind of go hand in hand.
Right.
We could be promoting the equipment and at the same time saying, you know, with this gear you could go climb here, or you can join us this Friday.
Yeah, it's a kind of a traditional outfitter type of approach where, you know, or at least the way that a lot of people do here in the States, you actually have like a retail facing part almost where they sell, you know, fly fishing gear or ski gear or whatever it might be, and they also arrange trips for you. So it sounds like maybe somewhat similar, but maybe not like a retail facing front. Is that an accurate description?
But we do have a retail facing front.
Oh, you do? You actually have a retail store?
Yeah, that was how the business started. We opened a retail store for hiking and camping equipment, and
gotcha.
The retail and the distribution evolved from that. Almost accidentally, it wasn't in our own plans, but people from embassies or various nonprofits or government entities in the country would walk into our shop and say, "Oh, this is great! You know, we have a tender coming up soon, and we need 100 helmets, or you know, a dozen ropes for rescue and belaying." And luckily for us, a lot of the companies that we work with that provided us with the equipment needed for hiking and camping also had like a safety professional line. So you'd see a company that manufactures harnesses, ropes, and hardware for climbing. They also manufacture harnesses, ropes, and hardware for safety and search and rescue and safety at hiking. So those kind of evolved naturally from the retail store. But we do have a brick and mortar shop that people can go into and buy a backpack, hiking boots, pants, headlamps, whatever you need.
Fascinating. So really that was the catalyst, right? Like that was the, and you guys got into that, you know, so semi intentionally. It sounds like it's you put a business plan together and you made this store, and then everything else you've done since then has really just sprung from there, is what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, and to be completely honest with you, it wasn't much of a business plan. It was more of like an inspirational document.
A vision.
Vision, exactly. It was
a vision.
And you know, with business plans, you need like proper market research, and that market simply didn't exist. We were kind of going on a hunch that the outdoor industry was about to explode in the country.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot more interest from locals as well as tourists that want to come visit Jordan.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily a totally foreign business challenge to a lot of people who might be watching. I mean, you're trying to, especially in sustainability, you're you're in many cases you have new technology or you're doing things that people haven't done before. So I think everybody might be able to relate to that in a number of different ways, just because for the most part we're often doing things that are new or trying to bring something to market that doesn't exist or build a bigger market for something that has a small market, right? So that's great. So I want to ask you a little bit more about this guy in Cuba and your trip over there, because I think that's pretty fascinating, right? And how that ties into the Bedouin culture. And I have to admit, I'm not well educated on the Bedouin culture, so you might have to give me a little bit of help here. But I mean, you said that the Bedouins are a very oral culture, right? And that they don't really write anything down, and that anything that's transferred is just transferred orally from father to son, mother to daughter, et cetera, right? And is there a language barrier there, or did these cultures have their own language that's different from the region, or no?
They all speak Arabic.
Yeah.
So in the Middle East region, everybody speaks for the most part Arabic, but it's different dialects.
Right.
So when I'm with the Bedouins, I can understand 90% of what they say.
Okay. So it's maybe just words, vocabulary.
Yeah, they do have their own words and phrases that would sound foreign to me. But like if I asked them to explain it and break it down or speak a little bit more slowly, I would be able to understand what they're saying.
Okay. And this guy in Cuba, I think that's what you were getting at, was that there was something that he just knew intrinsically that really brought something to light that solved the problem, right? So do you see and you said, okay, well, we don't know yet. We may make videos. We may make maybe I write a book. How do you see that unfolding? Do you think that I guess your hope is that there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and as you go, you'll discover those things and then collect them and hopefully present them to the broader public for consumption? Is that kind of a
So what I'm trying to do is get more people involved, and since this is not a business, I can't afford to pay anyone, especially that there's no grant money yet. Whoever decides to be involved is just simply passionate about the project and wants to contribute somehow. So, for example, I'm a photographer, so I can take photographs of the Bedouin people, I can take photographs of the desert, and I can take photographs of the plants. I've spoken to one of my good friends who's an ethnobotanist, and she's very interested in this project, so she's going to help me with the actual research and collecting information on the plants. We spoke to another friend of ours who is an illustrator, and she suggested that she could, sketch up the plants for a book or a website. I've also reached out to one of my good friends. He's an archaeologist, an architect, a designer, a painter, and a bunch of other things. And he has a lot of connections with local communities that I don't have access to personally.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is, how receptive do you think they're going to be? I mean, I think if that just because you want to doesn't mean they want to, right? So, and how is that something you think you're going to have to sell to them? Do you have to, try and get them to believe in what you're doing in order to get them to be forthcoming with you?
Yes, definitely. Because this, first and foremost, it relies on them more than anyone else. Because these are their stories, it's their information, their secrets, what they know. And we can't collect information from people that simply don't want to give it to us. Mm-hmm. So getting in contact with the right communities, reaching them through the right individual, and then explaining in as much detail, but also as simply as possible, what we're trying to do and what it means for them, for their communities, for the country, and for the world, I think is very, very important. It's also important to note that I believe that they would be much more likely to be engaged if they know that this is not for any kind of economic purpose. It's not just people coming into this local community to steal ideas to make money off of them. No, this is a genuine effort to protect and preserve an oral tradition. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So as long as we kind of just keep that in mind and make sure that we explain ourselves very clearly, I think we will find more people looking to collaborate than to get in our way.
Interesting, and I guess the fun part is you really get to tie together. You like being outdoors, you like hiking, you like, I don't know if the mountaineering part is going to help very much with the Bedouins, but maybe so. So, I mean, I would guess you're going to probably end up spending considerable time, you know, traveling with these folks and being with them in order to learn. It's gonna mean you being outdoors and with your camera and I guess doing two things you love, right? So I mean, it can't be all bad, right? Doesn't sound like too hard of work if that's what you love to do.
Yeah.
That's great. So
that's the
I got one more interesting question for you that I want to throw at you. What is one thing that you believe that most people would disagree with you on?
What is one thing I believe that most people would disagree with me? That's a good question. Well, what's coming to mind right now is something that I was talking about not too long ago. But I hear a lot that our generation, you know, Generation X and Y, and people that were born before the internet, right before the internet or after it, short attention span, don't want to read, just want the headlines, you know, just the tweet or the 30-second video clip. And I think that, I mean, there's definitely some truth to that, but I think this is also a problem that has been created and propagated by those very same forms of media. So what I think is that people are actually hungry for long form content, for long narratives, for long videos, long documentaries, big books. And if the people producing this content continue to peddle to this notion that they just want the spark notes, they just want the highlights, then it's just that cycle is going to continue to propagate. And ultimately, we're going to end up with, well, a generation that perhaps is not interested in content, but also this content does not exist.
Yeah.
So that might be one of those things. I do believe that people are hungry for long form content and things that are not just shallow, but go in depth and there's analysis and thought. But it's not just the responsibility of the consumer, but also the media producers need to have this in mind and not just produce things that they think their audience or customer base is interested in.
Sounds like another business plan to me.
Story of my life.
But not until you're done with the Bedouins. You got a full plate, my friend. Let me ask you one last question before we wrap up. And I mean, this has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed talking to you about this. I mean, I never would have guessed half of what you just told me, and it's been really fascinating learning about you and what you do. Tell me if of all the things that you have going on, whether whether it's personal, whether it's mountaineering, whether it's photography, whether it's your outfitting business, whether it's your project with the Bedouins, if there was anything that you could benefit from the broader SIBF network, that could be anything. It could be mentorship, it could be funding, it could be simply people who are interested in the same things that maybe want to join you in something you're doing. Whatever it is, what would benefit you most from the broader network? And by the broader network, I'm including all of us: SIBF, SELA, MELA, SELA. There's a big network of people, and that's part of why we're even doing this, right? We're trying to share and we're trying to collaborate, and it's so somebody sees this and they're watching it and they want to what is it that you're interested in that they may be able to bring to you or help you with?
Well, I think actually the two that you mentioned in the beginning, mentorship, definitely. For all of these ideas, either the ones that have, like my companies, what started, it's a startup. The skill set required for that phase, you need to be an entrepreneur, you need to be willing to not eat, not sleep, be stressed out all the time, do all the work yourself. But now that the company is maturing, I mean, we're in our 6th year, it's the skill sets required to keep the company growing and thriving and managing all of that is shifting. So I'm always looking for people to talk to. I've got a lot of questions on these types of issues. Somebody who's done it before, saw a startup go into adolescence and maturity and all of that. Another important one is the nonprofit work that we're doing. None of these initiatives are registered anywhere. They're just initiatives that we started, and they kind of fall under Trex, but I do hope to kind of start a nonprofit organization and maybe even eventually a foundation. And so to be able to reach out and speak to people that have done that before or are doing it today would also be very beneficial. And then last but not least, funding. But who doesn't need funding?
Right. Okay, great. Well, hopefully there are people out there watching that are interested in providing some of that to you, or all of that to you. So as I mentioned earlier, it's been fascinating. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And if anyone out there watching has any interest in following up with Hareth about anything in the Spotlight Series interview, his contact information can be found on the closing slide, email address, and phone number for you to reach out to him directly. And we certainly encourage you to do that if you want to chat about anything in this video today. So again, thank you, Hareth, and we appreciate your time, and it's been fascinating.
Thank you very much.